Hello there. I am speaking to the man, the myth, the legend, Ron Gura, who is a serial entrepreneur slash angel investor slash strong Zionist slash good friend. I could keep going. Um, Ron, give me, before we jump into empathy, your new baby, and the really exciting news, give me 35 seconds, 45, I'll be generous, on Ron Gura. Who is Ron Gura?
Um, in and out from startups to big companies, trying to focus on mission-driven products as far as I can, and excited to be here today.
Beautiful. So I really actually love that you just said that because I think there are many different transformations slash transitions Israel or the Israeli tech ecosystem's going through. One of them, as you know, is I think you would agree that we're no longer as an ecosystem looking to build startups. I think most entrepreneurs slash investors are looking for, the ability to build larger companies. I just spoke to Alex Boaziz from Deal, just to give an example. Obviously, there's Wiz and speaking about Wix later and on TV. And, it's just really we're seeing that. And we're also seeing, I think, at least from my perspective, more and more entrepreneurs trying to build companies that make the world a better place in a very real way. And empathy, I would say, is the top of that list. So I guess let's just get this out of the way. Empathy really speaks to me and resonates with me on a personal level because it deals with death and what a family has to do and the challenges of doing that after a loved one dies. So for obvious reasons, it spoke to me from day one. And when I was sitting the other day minding my own business and I got an email from The Wire that you raised a monster round, nothing could make me happier to read that. And I want to hear more about it. What is empathy? How did you think of the idea? And walk me through the process until this round, which again was a monster round. Tell me about that and just give me the whole spiel.
Of course. And Eli, that's another thing we have in common. Well, no loss is similar, but being a bereaved brother is something that I don't wish upon anyone I know. Um, and yeah, it's inescapable and inevitable, but at the end of the day, until you actually lose a loved one and you go through it, then it's something we're trying really hard not to contemplate. Our own self-mortality is something we really try as humans very hard not to think about day in and day out. A little bit of why we have all this fear and greed behind us, because we're really focusing on building stuff, especially here in Tel Aviv, where building is like second nature. But I'll say empathy is the friend you wish you had when you lose a loved one. So it's that knowledgeable kind of neighbor that happens to be a lawyer, maybe also a former social worker, really good coordinator, really good with bureaucracy, but a good listener. And we do put that into a product. So, 2021, we launched this headspace for grief that is coupled with a turbo tax for estate settlement. And the reason we did both is we don't think you get to decouple the two. We fundamentally believe grief is made hard by logistics, logistics are made harder by grief, and it's only if you put very cohesive experience into the market and you can really mix between what scalable technology can do and what humans are best at, you really get a cohesive experience. Bottom line, save people time, money, headaches when they lose a loved one.
I love that. So first of all, I got to say I love the name. Just empathy is just a great name for a company. By the way, do you have a tagline?
Well, a few of them depends on the product evolution, but right now I'll say um, helping families through life's most challenging moments.
Okay, you ready for my suggestion for a tagline?
Go for it.
I'm actually not kidding. I'm only half kidding, but I'm not kidding. Life after death. That's it. Isn't that a great time? My check is in the mail. No, but seriously, the reality is that, as you said, and I'll just kind of reiterate, when you lose a loved one, the last thing you want to think about is planning this and their will and the funeral and logistics and their death certificate. And it's like, dude, let me just like mourn. And unfortunately, that's part of the process. And it actually, I think it's fair to say that, at least from my perspective, it's strange that no one's done this before. Right? There's obviously a massive market. I mean, the entire humanity is your market. And really, like, it's a real problem that I think basically every single person who loses a loved one deals with. I mean, there's so much to do after a loved one dies. You just don't want to do any of it. You just want to sit and mourn. So that's what empathy solves, and I love it. So give me like a little bit about the actual features slash roadmap, and just give me the story of the actual company from a, let's call it, technical slash product perspective.
Sure. I'll tell you more about the product, but maybe even a bit before, if we zoom out to what you said about this being a taboo topic and not being addressed before. Well, the the entry to barrier here was not a regulatory one or a technology one. It was really about aversion. It was really about people not thinking they can deal with it or build for this. So you need the stars to align in order to get a team together that is willing to address what we think about as loss. And no offense to your tagline, we don't use the D word for a reason. Um, from a chemistry level, we just don't want to do it. And just as much as a social worker is not really about the X that happened before she met the client or he met the client. So we're not really about death. We're really about empowering people with bereavement and everything that happens after, because loss is inevitable. It's just going to happen 100%. Now, the question is, how can we get you back on your feet again? How can we face the change? Well, the change you didn't want in your life, unlike the change you're looking for. So from a product perspective, this means, this award-winning app that has a lot of emotional support. If it's grief meditations, grief counseling, a care manager, content, audio, communities of people who had a similar loss and can empower each other, videos, mood tracking, and much more. And on the logistics side, think about anything that is just getting the red tape out of the way. So selling the property, dealing with probate. When we think about it, it's really about how do we empower people after the loss. That's why we don't use that D word. But thank you for the offer. People just don't want to hear about it.
Right.
They don't want to think about it. You can win a pitch competition with the D word, but you can't build a household brand because people will try so hard not to.
Right.
The way we think about the capabilities is really simple. Empower the family that is going through loss. Don't do anything that is neutral or negative. Never increase the share of wallet that is spent on the life transition, only decrease it. That's why it has to be a B2B2C model here. And make sure you're 100% aligned with their motivations and best interests. So when it comes to the actual capabilities, on the emotional side and grief, that means grief chaplains and care managers and grief support and mood tracking and audio and communities of people who had a similar loss and thousands of content and articles, and our chief empathy officer, David Kessler, who's literally the guy who wrote the books on the stages of grief, and we're so lucky to have him on the team. Um, and journaling, which is helping a lot of people. Anything from figuring out your mom's, recipes that might help you right now, kind of be reminded of her, all the way to a place where you can kind of reflect on how you're doing today. Now, on the practical administrative side, our mission is to take all the red tape out of the way. So luckily for us, we're having this conversation from Israel, which is probably the least worst place on the planet to lose a loved one because of a variety of reasons. We're talking about the density. We're talking about, without choosing favorites, Judaism has a really strong affinity to loss. Unfortunately, we got really good at that throughout the years. Other religions are really good at many other things, but from my perspective, Shiva is unique and extremely strong. When you couple that together with the fact that everyone's so close to each other, and there's no gifting tax, which means there's no inheritance tax, which means there's no estate tax, which means there's no probate. Well, just to give you an example, in the US, we're talking about thousands of dollars, more than a year of work, hundreds of hours of actual labor just to do the paperwork alone, without even talking about grief that has no timeline. We publish every year our report, our impact report. This year it's called the Grief Tax, and it's on empathy.com, and people can see that just 50 pages of infographics and data about what does it mean to lose a loved one. But when you ask about the capabilities and the features, selling the house, pre-filing probate, getting all your benefits from Social Security, from the VA, from your employer, insurance, the obituary, the ceremony, the eulogy, the
Wow.
vault, the will, anything you need to handle in one place. You can delegate to other family members. You can tackle tasks together. And that's our first flagship product. Since then, we launched additional products. One of them is the Life Vault, which is about estate planning, everything that happens before the loss from a more proactive persona. So these are the trust, the will, the guardianship, the power of attorney, the medical documents, the funeral preferences, everything is in one place. So basically, it's a gift of clarity. And just like anything else at empathy, it's not something you do for yourself.
Right.
It's about empowering the next of kin.
Beautiful, beautiful. So, just to clarify, are you active slash do you work in Israel, or it's totally not on your radar?
Well, short answer is no. We don't, outside of our, of course, mother entity and half of the team, and myself included, situated.
The product doesn't work in Israel.
The product doesn't work in Israel. It's a very small market
Right.
and a relatively small problem domain
Right.
relative to the US and Canada and
Right.
other areas we're getting into. However, I can't say no because one of our team members, after the last All-Ins, we asked people, to send us, just an idea they want to work on next year. And a couple of folks we said, we want to do this in Israel for all obvious reasons.
Right.
And we know it's going to be different, and we know it's not 100% aligned with business goals, but we want to do it. I think it will be good from an HR perspective. And so if one of the big life insurance companies are listening right now, if it's I don't know, RL or Migdal or Phoenix or whatever, we might call one of you for a deal. Here's an exclusive for the Ynet interview.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Love it. Okay, let's talk traction. Let's talk funding. What data slash numbers can you give me that's not confidential in terms of user base and just traction you've seen through, from launch?
Sure. So since launching in 21, um, we are now covering 45 million lives in the US.
Wow.
1 out of 5 claims to a life insurance carrier would not just sound like, hey, I lost my loved one, where's my money? And then the other person saying, sorry for your loss, check is in the mail. They now say, sorry for your loss, we're not going anywhere. We're going to stick around with you. Look at your phone. We just texted you a complimentary invite.
Wow.
The next 2 years, you got 24/7 support with the full range of grief and estate needs. And we're doing that with, MetLife and New York Life and Prudential and Helpful and Securian and Allianz and Voya and
Wow.
35 carriers.
Wow.
Um, in terms of traction, I think for us, it's really about the peace of mind that we get to provide to people, the very strong 76 NPS that we pride ourselves with, the 100% retention rate with our client base, which is not something I can say is sustainable,
Wait, what
but
do you mean? Well, what does that mean? 100% retention. What does that mean?
well, you think about B2B client retention, I would say we have 100% gross retention, meaning we never lost a partner.
Wow.
And we have a strong 140% on net revenue retention, which means we're growing with our existing partners and deepening the relationships with them. And these are some of the largest financial institutions on the planet. And 11 of them partnered with us onto what we call Empathy Alliance, which is a coalition of partners and carriers that also invested and took a minority stake at Empathy, next to great folks like Michael at Aleph and Avi at Entre and folks that you know from here on the ground that we're very lucky to have with us. Also, General Catalyst, an index
Wait.
of,
Hold on. We're going to get to the investors in a second. I just have to ask you a very cynical question. Sorry for being cynical so early in the morning, but what's in it for the insurance company other than, oh, this is nice and let me make you feel better? I mean, is there any, does this thing generate any money for them? Like, what's in it for these large, massive insurance companies to partner with you?
well, great question. I don't think any one of them is doing it because of my very brown eyes.
Maybe your great
And
beard.
maybe it could be, who knows? But I would say there's 6 to 7 different value propositions. The main one being generation loyalty. So right now, in the background, as we speak, the greatest wealth transfer in history is taking place, where more than $20 trillion are shifting hands in just over a decade because of the unique characteristics of the baby boomer generation, how frugal they were as a generation, and also how broad the generation is. So more money is shifting hands from father to son, if you will, than any other moment in history. These
Wow.
are large corporations that measure themselves on asset under management. This one is managing 800 billion, the other one is 2.5 trillion, the other one is 1.5 trillion. These are some of the names I mentioned. So they manage, thousands of billions. And as such, they're trying to keep that relationship, show their true colors during that moment of truth, and explain to the next of kin in so many different ways why this makes sense to consider them as a reinvestment opportunity. If I oversimplify this, because there's like 7 other geeky insurance things in there, I would say you can think about empathy as a glass of wine as you wait for your table in a very expensive $1 trillion restaurant where the wine has to be really good and thoughtful. Or you can think about as similar to a towing service on top of your car insurance, which is for a fraction of the premium, you'll get additional levels of support and peace of mind. Here, you're buying financial peace of mind, and the insurance company is adding emotional peace of mind, administrative peace of mind on top.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. I got to tell you, I speak a lot about Israeli tech ecosystem. Truth is, since the war, I speak more about advocacy. But when I speak about tech, I have like a structured talk. I talk about the funding. I talk about multinationals. Talk about the exits, the IPOs, etc. But the punchline of my talk is always impact tech. It's always how Israeli tech, not nonprofit, but Israeli tech is making the world a better place. I talk about cancer. I talk about money. I am officially adding you to my list because what you're doing is you're literally you're doing well by doing good, which is amazing. That's the best type. Okay, so funding. How much have you raised to date?
162
Wow,
million.
162 million. That's a lot of gumballs. Okay, and who are your
Also a
investors?
lot of
Because
commitment. You
what?
know, uh, you know better than most, but it's also a lot of commitment. These
Right,
are serious folks who are expecting serious returns, outsized returns. So
right.
we work really hard to create that value.
Right, which is a really important point. Actually, it's not for now, but that is a discussion worth having. Which is that people who watch the tech world from the side, they kind of glorify these monster rounds, like, oh, let's get a higher valuation. That when a company raises at a higher valuation or raises too much and they can't justify it down the road, that leads to down rounds, which is basically suicide for a startup. So I know that you have your kind of feet on the ground and you think about this properly. I would say most beginning entrepreneurs probably do not. Okay, so you've raised a significant amount of capital. And by the way, when I saw the news, honestly, I saw the round, which we'll talk about in a second, but I looked down and I saw the investors and I'm like, holy moly. Literally, it's not an exaggeration to say you have some of the best investors in the world on your cap table, and it's unbelievable. So give me some names.
We're very, very lucky to be working with some of the most purposeful VCs, but also some of the most progressive financial institutions that really think about this movement. From a venture perspective, I'll start first and foremost with our folks here in Tel Aviv. Our first backer was my long-term partner and friend, Michael, who led our seed together with Joel Cutler, who is the founder of General Catalyst,
Wow.
who is So we got Michael and Joel on the board, and Avi joined from Entray and
Let
kind
me
of
let me
like,
just cut you off here for 1 second. I just got to give a shout out to these people. People who don't know who Michael is, for example, was a partner at Benchmark before. He happens to be a childhood friend, but honestly, he knows, and anybody who follows me knows that if I had to choose a role model right after my father, it would be Michael. Not because of his, brilliant work in the VC space, but more the fact that he is a massive mensch. And here's a little tidbit about Michael Eisenberg that most people don't know. He never takes selfies. He is allergic to selfies. Like he'll take a picture, but he's like, I'm not doing selfies is too like, iPhone, iPad, I this generation. So he's anti-selfie. So that's just a beautiful thing about him. But, Aleph is widely regarded as one of the top venture firms in Israel, maybe the top, as far as I'm concerned, the top. So that's Michael Eisenberg. Avi Eyal from Entree Capital I have no way to describe him other than calling him a phenomenon. Like people, even in Israel, may not have heard of Avi Eyal because he's completely under the radar, does not make noise, does no PR. His portfolio is absolutely absurd. Like the companies that he's invested in are absurd. I think he's probably, at least according to Forbes, one of the most successful investors in the world, definitely in Israel. And here's again another tidbit. He makes a killer barbecue at his house for July 4th, which is interesting because he's not American. Okay, continue. General Catalyst. Bonkers.
a lot
Go
of
on.
fun facts over there. Yeah, I like that. Michael and Avi are very helpful and really value minded. Like, how can we help? How can we show up? Same for our friends at General Catalyst and Index Ventures who work so closely with us. And just the list goes on and on. Brewer Lane is a very specific insurtech fund that is almost not active in Israel, but they're, made the investment. And there's a guy there called John Kim. I'll tell you everything I know about life insurance, I learned from John Kim.
Wow.
That guy, he's so thoughtful I'm trying to get him to visit Tel Aviv more often. Um, we now had Adam Street joining the round. Adam Street are more known in the local scene as an LP. So this is a 60 billion plus AUM giant that is the LP for Michael and Joel and Danny at Index and Aleph and
Do
GC
they
and
do they
others.
make a lot of direct investments or it's mostly LP?
The vast majority is LP, but they have a few billions that they invest in direct investments, and we're very lucky to be partnered with such a credible financial institution. And we are in the business of trust. Insurance is trust, families are trust, financials, emotional. You know, one of the we have really amazing venture investors. I will fail to mention all of them from Abby from Prime Times, really focusing on elderly and Semper Virens, who are so thoughtful about specifically employee benefits. But then the alliance, I think, is quite unique because, well, you hear about Series C companies pretty much every day. Like sometimes they raise less money, sometimes they raise more money, but you hear about these rounds all the time. It's really not any form of validation, in my opinion. It's just fuel. Much more interesting, in my opinion, and at the risk of being immodest, far more unique is 11 giant financial institutions forming a coalition. Well, any other day of the week, these guys are competing against each other.
I was going to say that. Yeah.
So you hear about, Google investing in an AI company or Intuit investing in a fintech company, and that's a strategic investment. Sometimes it has warrants or an M&A angle. What we have here is really different. It's the largest carrier in the world, Allianz, the largest mutual in the US, New York Life, the largest group life in the world, MetLife, the largest reinsurance company in the world, Munich Re,
Wow.
Citibank, the largest retirement entity, TIAA. These are, and many more, are coming together. They say, you know what? If a company like Empathy exists and thrives, then we all win because we have to elevate the beneficiary experience. We have to find ways to create more value for the next of kin.
Love it. Okay, Ron, we're running out of time and you're a busy man, so I'm going to let you go soon. I'll just say that in a strange way, and I don't know if you'd agree with this, but in a strange way, something about this company reminds me of Lemonade, right? Maybe it's because they're making insurance cool again. I don't know. But here's the thing. From my perspective, everything you said is, of course, true. The reason, other than my personal, resonation, if that's a word, the fact that you resonate with me personally, I think, I speak about this often. I think that if you look at the winning companies out there, whether it's Uber, Airbnb, Facebook, Lemonade, other things, they're all taking an industry that always existed, but was never disrupted and was the farthest thing from sexy, and they made it sexy again. Or as we say, disruption, democratization, whatever buzzword you want to use. I don't know that there's a bigger industry, and again, I know you don't like to use the D word, but I don't know that there's a bigger market, a bigger industry that is the opposite of cool than death. And again, call it loss, call it whatever you want. It's, again, an endless market, massive, and there's nothing about it that's ever been disrupted. So for me, and again, insurance, making insurance, forward thinking out of the box, investing in a company like Empathy, to me, that's one of the components I believe that makes it so successful because, again, massive market, ripe for disruption, and the right entrepreneurs, the right team, the recipe for, a unicorn, or bigger than a unicorn, I should say, a rocket ship. Rowan, listen, it's amazing. Obviously, this goes without saying because but if I could ever do anything to help in any capacity, I'd love to help. And when you do launch in Israel, do let me know because I got to be honest with you. Like I was at a hotel for the holiday just now and I bumped into someone who she's like, I don't know what her role is, but she writes wills. That's what she does. And I said to her, I'm like, yeah, we got to write a will. And we laughed about the fact that we're talking about a will on holiday, but think about this, but think about what people do. Like, how do you write a will? You sit there with like a lawyer. There's zero disruption in that whole industry. So it's very exciting. And yeah, keep doing what you're doing.
Oh, thank you. And I just want to unpack a few really good, interesting things you said there, but there couldn't be a bigger compliment for us than to be compared to our friends at Lemonade. These are some of the most amazing founders and product leaders. The main kind of similarity is, and again, this is my words, not theirs. I think Lemonade was the first brand first company. Well, a lot of us in Tel Aviv start with technology, start with product. And when you have this Goliath and David Goliath story, and they definitely had one, going against the entire insurance industry and breaking this unfair formula and doing so well, they started with the brand, and that's definitely what we had to do because of the aversion. We definitely think, by the way, empowering families is sexy, and you should come hang out at the office more to see how we roll. But I will tell you, these are idols for us. There's a reason Michael and Joel are also early backers of Lemonade. We're very lucky to have both CEOs of Lemonade, Daniel and Shai, co-CEOs and founders, backers, seed backers at
Wow.
Empathy.
Wow. That's
So we're
amazing. It
learning
doesn't surprise me. That's amazing.
we're learning a ton from that team, and I just want to give a big shout out for everyone on the team, former employees over there, everyone. That's an iconic brand that was built out of Tel Aviv, and it's
Yep.
amazing to see a global brand, a consumer household brand in New York, in San Francisco, that is built probably 5 minutes away from you right now.
Shout out to Tamir Jerby putting together that brand. I mean, it's really, you nailed it. Lemonade is, and by the way, I talk about this all the time with startups. Like, I always give the example of a BlackBerry, right? Anyone over the age of 40 had a BlackBerry and loved their BlackBerry. It was an amazing product, like a revolution, I might say. And where are they today, right? Or by the way, watches. If you look at watches, right? Assuming you don't know anything about watches, I ask you the top watch brand, Rolex. And I say to you, what do you know about Rolex? Nothing. Pure brand. So I'm a big believer in that. It's amazing. The last round, by the way, was 57?
Around
Just now, yeah, the latest.
72.
72. I don't know why I said 57. I need more coffee. All right, Rowan, thank you so much for your time this morning. And like I said, keep doing what you're doing, not only because it makes Israel look good and the tech world look good, but because the world needs more empathy. Pun very much intended. Have an awesome day. Keep doing what you're doing. Always here to help. Take care, Ren. Thanks.
Thank you.